Have you ever wondered why that playlist, the one full of melancholic songs, that dark, moody track you put on when the weather sort of matches your mood,
Yeah.
why it feels not just enjoyable, but absolutely necessary,
Mm-hmm.
like a psychological vitamin, even though it seems like it should be actively making you feel bad?
It's the ultimate paradox of human emotion,
I,
isn't
I,
it? And it's one that has been keeping thinkers from, well, the earliest philosophers to modern neuroscientists, exceptionally busy for over 2,000 years.
right.
We are diving deep into the science of enjoying sad music, which really means grappling with this fundamental philosophical question. How can actively seeking out and consuming signals that evoke sadness or pity or fear actually result in feelings of pleasure?
Exactly. We're not talking about just, tolerating sadness. We're talking about craving it.
Yeah.
For over 2 millennia, thinkers, and we're talking Aristotle, David Hume, and so many others, they puzzled over what became known as the problem of negative emotions in the arts, or the paradox of tragedy. Why do we seek out art forms like these gut-wrenching tragedies in the theater, or that incredibly mournful song that explicitly portray or evoke negative feelings? It feels like a glitch in our emotional operating system.
Well, the core puzzle here is the adapter mechanism. I mean, if the purpose of a negative emotion is to signal danger or loss or some kind of need to motivate us to change our circumstances,
Yeah.
why would we deliberately invite that signal into our lives through art? If the music truly made us miserable, we would just change the channel.
But we don't.
We don't. So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack the sources, to really understand the biological and psychological mechanisms that finally resolve this paradox, and show how sad music isn't a drain on your mental health, but acts instead as this powerful emotional tool for mental cleansing, for reflection, and for profound influence on both the mind and the soul.
Okay, so to start, let's nail down our terminology a bit. We're often talking about what's called lyrical music here.
Right.
This is basically a brief musical composition that's set to a lyrical text, where the overall message and the emotional impact give equal weight to both the music and the words themselves.
And that emphasis on the dual nature, the sound and the words, it matters profoundly because lyrical music is rarely just passive entertainment.
Yeah.
It's a form of artistic expression that's assumed to influence people in a variety of powerful ways. It aims higher than just your ears. It reaches the mind, the emotions, and what some people would describe as the soul. And as a form of literary work, it conveys rich meaning, complex themes, and it's often relatively easy for a mass audience to understand, which makes it a really powerful vehicle for complex emotional delivery.
It becomes this incredibly potent expression of the author's deepest feelings, their nerves, their anger, their disappointment, their expectations about the world around them. It can convey messages about profound problems of human life, social conditions, politics, the history of wars, family complexities, struggles with social status. Sometimes, and we'll definitely get into this later with Radiohead, it contains outright pointed criticism of the government or the ruling class.
The music structure gives the words weight, and the words, in turn, give the sound context. It's a feedback loop.
So when we talk about the emotional response, we need to be really precise. Psychologists categorize the relationship between the emotion that's perceived in the music and the emotion that's felt by the listener.
Right. So if you listen to a piece in a minor key, slow tempo, and you feel genuine, miserable sadness, that's what they call a positive relationship. The emotions just line up.
That makes intuitive sense, but it's not really the phenomenon we're focused on today, is it?
No, not at all.
The paradoxical thing we're really investigating is the negative relationship. This is where listeners perceive the sadness. They know the music sounds tragic or melancholy or intense, but they often report feeling pleasure or happiness or satisfaction or other positive, sometimes complicated states like being moved.
Exactly. You perceive the sadness that's encoded in the slow rhythms and the minor chords, but you feel something that keeps you listening, often with, great enjoyment and a sense of relief.
That discrepancy, that negative relationship between perception and feeling, that's the space we are operating in.
That's it. We want to know why this discrepancy exists, why the brain flips that affective switch, and why people seek out this complex emotional state so regularly.
Okay, let's unpack this with what seems like the most straightforward, elegant answer, the one that makes headlines, even if it turned out to be a bit of a scientific red herring.
I know where you're going.
Let's talk about the initial proposed biological cheat code, the famous or maybe infamous prolactin theory of sad music.
This is a beautifully compelling concept because it offers such a neat, purely physiological answer to this emotional paradox.
All right.
The theory posits that the enjoyment of sad music stems from the body's innate biological attempt to comfort itself hormonally in response to the perceived sadness cues.
The idea is so neat. Sad music often emulates the acoustical features of grief-related vocalizations. Things like sobbing, wailing, or the melancholic moans of distress. Researchers call this a voice music homologue.
And if we dig into what a voice music homologue actually is, it becomes really clear why the brain might be fooled. Human distress calls so, think weeping, or the plaintive cry of a child.
Yeah.
They're acoustically characterized by a low pitch, slow speed, and a slight acoustic wavering, or vibrato. So when a piece of music uses minor keys, a slow tempo, and adds a bit of subtle modulation, the brain registers these auditory features as a biological distress signal.
Even if that distress is coming from a violin.
Even if it's coming from a violin, the brain just hears the pattern.
So, the brain interprets this musical sadness as if it were real grief or real stress happening to us, or maybe to someone nearby, and it kicks off a protective hormonal response to deal with what it thinks is a crisis.
Exactly. The specific hormone proposed to be released in response is prolactin, or PRL. Prolactin is normally associated with the stress response, the regulation of emotion during high distress, and it's known to be released under conditions that require self-soothing or emotional relief. It's a self-care chemical, if you will.
So if the music is sad, your brain thinks you are actually distressed, and it releases this soothing chemical to make you feel better. It's actually a biological hug.
Yeah.
Your brain is literally comforting you with hormones when it perceives musical sadness.
It sounds like the perfect evolutionary loophole, doesn't it?
It does.
It is a profoundly attractive narrative, and it provides a quick fix to the paradox. But, and this is a big but, here is where we hit the necessary experimental twist. The moment scientific rigor complicates the elegant theory. A study was conducted specifically to test this prolactin theory of sad music. Researchers exposed listeners to carefully matched sad and happy music conditions while tracing changes in their serum prolactin levels.
So they weren't messing around. This involved actual blood draws to measure the chemical changes, controlling for things like the time of day and natural hormonal fluctuations.
Absolutely. It was a rigorous test.
So what was the verdict? Did those melancholic songs spike the comfort hormones?
Well, the surprising and I think critical result was that the overall findings were inconsistent with the prolactin theory of sad music. Sad music did not reliably cause the comforting hormonal response the theory predicted. The data just didn't support the hypothesis that sad music stimulates a protective, pleasure-inducing release of prolactin.
Wow.
Yeah, and this created a major counterintuitive turn for researchers who were hoping for a simple neurochemical explanation for the paradox.
So much for the easy biological hug theory. But if sad music didn't raise those PRL levels to provide hormonal comfort, what did the experiment actually see? Did the hormones do anything at all?
They did, but in the opposite direction.
Why?
Researchers found that listening to happy music actually led to a measurable reduction of serum prolactin concentrations in listeners.
A reduction?
A reduction. And crucially, this decrease in PRL was linked to an increase in self-assessed pleasure. So it suggested that happy music might reduce stress hormones rather than sad music increasing comfort hormones.
Wow. That flips the script entirely.
Yeah.
The hormonal effect they found was the opposite of what was hypothesized for sad music. So that suggests the immediate comforting biological mechanism based purely on prolactin release is either way more complicated or maybe just non-existent in this musical context.
The takeaway here is really important. While the idea of a hormonal hug is compelling and it aligns with our intuitive desire for self-soothing, the direct, simple mechanism proposed by the prolactin theory, it just doesn't hold up under experimental scrutiny.
Right.
This means we have to look beyond a direct hormonal release to understand the pleasure.
That tracks. Because if the comfort isn't coming from a chemical release that's designed to solve a problem the music created, then that means the pleasure must be generated in the sophisticated way our mind processed the signal, right?
Exactly.
The paradox persists, and we need a better cheat code.
Absolutely. So we move now into the cognitive and affective dimensions. If it's not prolactin, why the enjoyment? Many scholars argue that the sadness reported by listeners who enjoy sad music cannot possibly be genuine sadness. If it were truly miserable, painful sadness associated with a real loss, the experience wouldn't be enjoyable. That's the very definition of the philosophical paradox we started with.
So the brain must be doing some quick cognitive work to reframe that emotional input, transforming the potential misery into something pleasurable. Which brings us to the idea of mock sadness, or I guess more formally, aesthetic distance.
Precisely. The pleasure relies on a sophisticated cognitive assessment that transforms the felt emotion into something aesthetic, mock, or fictional sadness. We feel pleasure because our consciousness recognizes that we don't experience the actual threat or the painful, consequential reality that's associated with genuine sadness.
It's the safe, controlled environment effect. It's like watching a high-stakes drama unfold, but knowing you can pause it, or rewind, or just look away. The tears might be real, but the context is simulated. We get the intense emotional hit without the actual cost.
And the data strongly supports this idea that the felt emotion is often positive, even if the perceived music is intensely sad.
Right.
Studies show that when listening to sad music, participants consistently report feeling less gloomy, less meditative in a negative sense, and crucially, significantly less miserable than the perceived emotion of the track itself.
And conversely, they report feeling much more fascinated, feeling dear, being in love, merry, animated, sometimes even inclined to dance.
Exactly. In one key study, listeners explicitly reported feeling more romantic, more pleasant, and less tragic than the actual objective sadness they consciously perceived in the music.
So the initial label of sadness is just the cognitively salient starting point. It dominates the quick description, but the emotion quickly transforms into a far more complex, enjoyable, mixed emotional state.
That's a perfect way to put it. We perceive the dark clouds, but we feel the relief of being inside, watching the storm safely through a window.
That transition from simple sadness to a complex pleasure brings us to a really crucial idea about why humans engage with art in the first place. That leads us logically to the next big shift in research, the idea that music may have evolved as a tool to signal socioaffective fiction, or SF.
The SAF hypothesis suggests that music, particularly emotional music, serves a crucial adaptive function, especially in storytelling and emotional development. It leverages this aesthetic distance we just established. It's essentially providing emotional practice.
Right, think about the adaptive value of simulation. Why do kids play fight? Why do we read stories where the hero almost dies? Simulated scary or highly emotional situations, whether in horror media, narrative fiction, or sad music, have the adaptive function of preparing you for threatening situations in real life. We are safely rehearsing how to manage difficult, high-stakes emotions.
This rehearsal isn't just mentally cathartic, it physically strengthens our emotion regulation and resilience. You are, in a safe environment, training your emotional muscles.
Interesting.
And research has supported this. It showed that individuals who enjoy simulated encounters with threats, like fans of disaster movies, they demonstrated more robust psychological resilience when facing real-world crises, like the initial phases of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Wow.
Simulated encounters help us mentally rehearse coping mechanisms without the actual neurological shock of the real event.
And music is uniquely powerful in inducing this simulation state. It seems to transport the brain immediately into that fictional, safe landscape.
The neuroscience behind this is highly illuminating. Research shows that listening to music strongly activates brain areas associated with deep introspection and imaginary narrative.
Okay.
Specifically, we see high activity in the medial frontal cortex, the MFC, which is strongly associated with mind wandering, the brain's default narrative mode,
Right.
and the hippocampus, the HC, which is crucial for memory retrieval and eliciting imaginary associations.
So when the sad song comes on, the brain area is dedicated to creating internal narratives, retrieving memories, and deep introspection. They just light up. It's not just listening. It's an active internal movie being projected onto an emotional screen.
And that activation pattern, the MFC and HC, is significantly more active for musical emotions compared to non-musical emotional sounds, like simple vocalizations or natural sounds.
The music is special in that way.
It is. This suggests music communicates a setting, a fictional scenario, so strongly that it alone can transport the mind into its own story with coinciding emotional experiences. It's essentially prompting internal emotional fiction or simulation.
So the music provides the emotional landscape, the sonic sadness, and our brain uses that framework to indulge in a safe, productive form of emotional simulation. And that leads to the pleasant, complex feelings we associate with aesthetic sadness and increased resilience.
It's like a neurological sandbox for our feelings.
A neurological sandbox, I like that.
Now, let's shift our focus from the internal cognitive reframing to the social purpose of sadness, which leads us to the pleasurable compassion theory. This theory connects the enjoyment directly to our fundamental evolutionary prosocial instincts.
This starts with ethological theory, the study of animal behavior. And ethological theory suggests that the purpose of emotional displays like human weeping or a visible slump of the shoulders is less about providing neutral information like I am sad and more about manipulation.
Manipulation.
Well, yeah, in an evolutionary sense, encouraging observers to terminate aggression and offer altruistic assistance. Sadness displays are fundamentally a call for help, a plea for altruism.
That's the key evolutionary insight. The principal purpose of a genuine sadness display is to evoke pro-social compassion in observers, not just to communicate the displayer's exact emotional state.
Right.
Evoking compassion, assistance, and a shared emotional burden. That's the main evolutionary goal. It is a powerful social tool.
And this ties back perfectly to music because, as we established earlier, sad music is highly successful at acting as this ethological signal because of the voice-music homologue. It emulates the acoustical features of melancholic vocalizations.
Because music shares this deep affective resource with human vocalization, the cry, the wail, some researchers suggest that even purely instrumental sad music acts as a virtual person in distress.
A virtual person.
Yeah, the brain processes the sound of a cello's slow minor melody as a social signal, regardless of whether a person is physically present.
Okay, so if sad music is a virtual person in distress, then we respond with compassion. And here is the aha moment for the pleasure paradox.
Need this.
Research into altruism shows that altruistic acts, and even just the opportunity to behave altruistically, have been shown to activate the medial forebrain pleasure circuit.
The brain's reward center.
Exactly.
This suggests that compassion by itself is almost certainly a positively valenced affective state. Feeling compassion feels good. We are hardwired for it. We get an internal reward for seeing a signal of distress and responding, even if that response is purely internal and fictional.
So the positive feeling isn't coming from the sadness itself, it's coming from the positive pro-social feeling of compassion that the perceived sadness evokes. It's the feeling of being a good, empathetic human being that generates the pleasure.
Exactly. This altruistic response is deeply adaptive. It enhances inclusive fitness, which is just a fancy biological way of saying helping others today means the group, and possibly you, survives better tomorrow.
And that activation of the survival and social bonding mechanism feels inherently good, even if the distress that triggered it is fictional. This helps explain a huge variance in listener behavior. Why some people love sad music and other people just find it unbearable. It clearly comes down to individual differences, specifically trait empathy.
Researchers use tools like the Interpersonal Reactivity Index, or IRI, to characterize stable factors of trait empathy, and studies consistently find the enjoyment of sad music correlates strongly with two distinct factors within that index.
And the key correlation, the one that predicts enjoyment, is with empathic concern. This is the I feel sympathy for you factor. It's the positively valenced repercussive emotion. You feel compassion for the virtual person in the music.
And in stark contrast, the correlation is nominal, which means weak or non-existent for personal distress. That's the I feel your pain factor, which is commiseration and represents a net negative feeling state. If you score high on personal distress, that is, if you absorb and internalize the virtual person's pain, sad music is likely just painful and overwhelming.
So the mechanism works like this. Sad music lovers experience high levels of positive compassion, that good feeling of wanting to help, while experiencing only nominal levels of empathetic pain. And that tips the overall experience into a positive, affective state.
The causal train, as researchers describe it, is clear. Sadness evokes pro-social feelings, which in turn evokes pleasure.
It's important to note, though, that even though sadness is the most common self-reported emotion when listeners describe these tracks, researchers suggest that the emotion of being moved is the pivotal emotional component that leads to enjoyment.
Yeah, that state involves those mixed emotions. Sadness mixed with compassion and a sense of awe or profundity. The sadness is simply the most cognitively salient emotion, so it dominates the introspective report, even though the pro-social feeling is what provides the pleasure and the relief.
And this ties directly back to the idea of catharsis, that classic motivation for engaging with tragic art that Aristotle wrote about. The emotional release isn't just random. Listeners use sad music for very specific active mood regulation strategies.
The sources identify several common strategies. The first, and maybe the most potent, is catharsis or validation. This is the simple yet profound need to get sadness out of their system, to feel validated in their struggles, and experience emotions related to their own life circumstances. The music becomes a safe container for that emotional release.
Then there's the process of mental work and reflection. This is where the music isn't just an outlet. It's a tool you use to figure out ways to deal with problems, to see difficult situations from a different perspective, or to process past traumas.
Right. And reflection is explicitly defined in the research as attempting to deal with and overcome problems and difficulties using the musical experience as a catalyst.
What's fascinating is the complexity here, though.
Yeah.
While the reflection component was positively correlated with an adaptive cognitive style, using music proactively to deal with problems, it was also correlated with brooding, which suggests that individuals who turn to sad music for reflection might also be inclined toward rumination, but they are at least attempting to use the music adaptively to shift their perspective, rather than just dwelling in the pain.
Other identified motivations include straightforward mood repair, using the music for relaxation, and highly effective memory retrieval, where the music acts as a powerful trigger for past experiences, allowing the listener to recontextualize or reprocess those memories.
And the outcome of all these strategies, whether they're driven by prosocial compassion or personal reflection, is an adaptive one.
Completely. The vicarious emotional experience trains the listener to interpret physiological changes, the complex internal experience of emotions, and it fosters emotional intelligence and empathy.
So this improved ability to categorize and understand your own emotions enables you to deal with your internal states in a better way, which is crucial for psychological survival and resilience in the real world.
So your sad playlist isn't a sign of depression. It's a sign that you are emotionally intelligent and actively working on your internal narrative. It's an adaptive, complex mechanism.
A mechanism that has been leveraged brilliantly by artists for decades. Speaking of complex emotional states, let's ground this science in some specific, detailed music that truly embodies this paradox.
Yeah.
I'm thinking of the work of bands that marry intense lyrical content with highly evocative sonic landscapes, like Radiohead and Metallica.
Oh, absolutely. Lyrical music, as we defined it, is a powerful expression. When it comes to Radiohead, their work provides incredibly rich source material for this kind of emotional and social depth. They combine abstract musical feeling with razor-sharp lyrical commentary.
Let's focus on their seminal 1997 album, OK Computer. While it's often remembered for its themes of technological paranoia, the sources we looked at highlight the album's function as a profound literary Marxist critique of capitalist state slavery and poverty.
And the music gives weight to this deeply melancholic social diagnosis.
Let's break down how two specific tracks from that album act as catalysts for the kind of emotional reflection and aesthetic distance we discussed. Take no surprises. The lyric, "A heart that's full up like a landfill," is immediately arresting. It paints a picture of the proletariat's life that is profoundly bleak. It's a life deemed disposable, full of pain and emotional scars, vividly captured by that brutal word, landfill.
And the song's music itself reinforces this despair and stagnation. It's almost a lullaby, isn't it? Slow and cyclical, suggesting a quiet, relentless hopelessness.
It really is.
The poor are portrayed as thin and starved, required by their demanding jobs to work far more than they should, and their struggles are ignored. The central critique is that the working class's plight in a capitalist society is ignored. Their lives are characterized by sacrifice and pain that never leads to relief.
When you listen to that track, the calm, almost gentle tempo and the acoustic chimes, those sonic elements, they prevent the lyrics from causing genuine anger or panic. Instead, they encourage a meditative, reflective sadness. You are simulating the feeling of entrapment without the immediate survival threat. That is aesthetic distance in action.
Absolutely. And then you have Climbing Up the Walls. Here, the lyric suggests that profits and structural inequality are the driving forces behind what the band views as a worldwide demand for forced labor. The proletariat, or the working class, is locked into a system that curbs their lives, making them feel as if they only exist to serve the economic engine.
And the song uses a denser, more claustrophobic sonic palette to portray this feeling. The system is relentless. The greater the proletariat's dependency on capital for survival, the more viable the exploitation becomes. The song portrays the bleak and oppressive nature of the capitalist system, where poverty follows the working class everywhere, constantly exploited through set rules.
The album as a whole depicts the lives of the poor as jobs that slowly kill them.
The simulation here is intense, but because the listener is engaging through a piece of art, you can choose to listen or not, the mind translates the horror into that functional aesthetic distance, allowing for deep emotional processing of injustice without being paralyzed by its immediate reality.
Now, what's fascinating is what happened after OK Computer became this massive success. Following the intense media scrutiny and the weight of being deemed the voice of that era's technological and social paranoia, Radiohead actually inverted their creative process.
Right, for subsequent albums like Kid A and Amnesia.
Exactly. They shifted their emphasis dramatically, moving away from explicit lyrical critique toward the raw, abstract power of sound and texture.
Mm.
Tom York confirmed that the words themselves on Kid A were intentionally empty, leaving maximal room for the music and sonics to communicate the feeling. He struggled profoundly to write lyrically following the weight of OK Computer, and became obsessed with looking for accidents in the music, because the sound spoke to him more clearly than words.
This shift highlights something crucial: the sheer power of abstract musical structure to convey profound feeling, which goes far beyond literal lyrical content.
Yes.
Sadness can be triggered purely by those acoustic features we discussed earlier: the low pitch, the slow tempo, proving the existence of that voice music homologue even in avant-garde electronic soundscapes.
That brings us to bands that resonate on an intensely personal, emotional level, like Metallica. Their music provides a powerful outlet for effective expression that their fans frequently describe as emotional cleansing or catharsis in action, exactly matching the mood regulation strategies we identified.
Fan feedback provides such clear anecdotal evidence of this adaptive function. Tracks that delve into darkness, despair, or deep personal struggle often create the most intense lasting attachment because they achieve what researchers call co-representation.
Co-representation.
They represent the listener's own emotional experience, making them feel less alienated and alone.
Fade to Black is a perfect example of this. Fans cite that song for literally saving countless people from ending themselves and helping them navigate through extremely tough times. The song is so potent, embodying hopelessness and catharsis simultaneously, that it functions as a therapeutic tool for emotional validation.
Then there's one. This track is based on the book Johnny Got His Gun, which details the horror of a soldier trapped in his body after losing all his limbs, his sight, speech, and hearing. The song is so difficult to get through because of its sheer horror and hopelessness.
Yet, fans identify deeply with the idea of being trapped in that situation, not literally, but metaphorically, by trauma or circumstance or mental illness.
Right.
This high-stakes simulation of complete loss is the ultimate example of socio-affective fiction. The listener is safely rehearsing the deepest fear of existential confinement, which strengthens their emotional resilience in reality. They feel the horror, but because it's fictionalized through the music, they receive the positive reward of successful emotional regulation.
We also see this mechanism at work in tracks like The Unforgiven, Bleeding Me, and Until It Sleeps. These are all tracks cited for resonating with personal struggle, with inner demons, and the need to deal with suppressed negative feelings. They're not just sad songs, they are functional tools for internal mental work and reflection.
The ultimate function is that music about alienation makes feeling alienated feel less alienating.
Mm-hmm.
This co-representation of emotional experience emerges from the shared recruitment of similar neural mechanisms. The mirror neuron system, which is involved in understanding action and intention, is recruited in both the artist, the sender, and the listener, the perceiver. The music becomes a shared language of feeling, validated by the biological reward of compassion.
So let's synthesize what we've uncovered in this deep dive. We started with a wonderful, albeit inaccurate idea of a simple hormonal comfort, the prolactin theory, the idea of a direct chemical hug.
Right. We had to move past that simple neurochemical explanation to discover that the true cheat code lies in the brain's sophisticated capacity for emotional simulation and our innate prosocial drive.
The enjoyment comes from a dual adaptive process. The first part is the pleasure of aesthetic distance, where we safely simulate emotional threat without experiencing actual danger or consequences. This is the power of socio-affective fiction.
And the second powerful part is the pleasure of pro-social compassion, where the perceived sadness in the music evokes empathic concern within us, activating the brain's pleasure circuits and providing a positive, effective reward for the act of compassion, even toward a virtual person.
This means your sad playlist is actually a highly evolved and powerful tool for mental health, emotional development, and resilience.
Absolutely.
The ability to engage in mind-wandering and simulation, combined with feeling that positive sense of compassion, makes sad music a systematic way to achieve catharsis and productive reflection.
It's an adaptive mechanism that proves the value of art extends far beyond simple hedonistic pleasure. It's also about education, challenging our perspective, and social tuning, helping us better navigate and understand the emotional environment around us and improving our emotional intelligence.
And here is a final thought for you to chew on that builds on the science of simulation. We discussed how music and emotional expression share common features and may arise from phylogenetically primitive mechanisms relating to movement and posture.
Right. We know that the perception of acoustic patterns in music elicits a complex, affective response that is mediated by brain regions like the insula, which tightly connects the limbic, the emotional system, and the motor, the movement system. This suggests that the brain might be simulating the emotional state in the listener by running a simulation of the physical action associated with that emotion.
So what if listening to your favorite melancholy track isn't just listening to a sad song, but unconsciously simulating the movement and posture of grief? The slump of the shoulders, the heavy breathing, the slow, dragging steps, training your body to cope with tragedy in a safe, pleasurable, and fictional environment.
That silent internal performance of sadness might be the ultimate survival mechanism built right into your favorite minor key.
Think about the physiological rehearsal you're giving yourself the next time those opening piano chords drop.